Hello there, welcome to Film 2018. I'm Al Murray, again, still, that's right. The eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed I am not Zoe Ball, who was supposed to be here tonight. She's quite rightly putting her feet up after a massive sport relief bike ride, which raised over £1 million. So I think we'll let her off, just this once. So it's late, but we're live, and we want to hear from you, so why not tweet us? Tonight, we're talking things that go bump in the night, or rather don't, as we take a look at the rise of the classy horror film. What's your favourite horror flick? Are you a fan of a good old jump scare, or do you prefer your thrills with a side order of existential dread? Let us know. Details on the screen now. Right, let's get this show on the road, shall we? Coming up tonight. Taking the lead. Shaggy dog stories galore in Wes Anderson's stop-motion epic, Isle of Dogs.
Dogs bring out the best of us.
This is The Oasis.
Grab your joystick and fire up your hard drive. Steven Spielberg gets meta in Ready Player One. And be afraid. Be very afraid. Horror gets a makeover. Is cinema's trashiest genre getting classy?
Horror films are society's nightmares.
Plus, we'll take a look at actor-turned-director Paddy Considine's heartfelt boxing drama, Journeyman. Computing, pugilism and talking dogs. Just a normal Wednesday night in the film show to get you over the midweek hump. Joining me to chat it through are screenwriter and podcast wonder Deborah Frances-White and our ever-brilliant film critic, Ellen E. Jones. Ellen, hello.
Hello.
Good week watching films?
Wonderful week.
Fantastic, Deborah?
An unqualified delight, Al.
Oh, God. Well, let's get going then. First up is the new stop-motion tale from cinematic master of quirk, Wes Anderson. Isle of Dogs features the voices of Bill Murray, Ed Norton and Anderson new boy, Bryan Cranston. That's right, from off of Breaking Bad. You watched it on a box set. Set in a near-futuristic version of Japan, it's the story of one man's search for his missing dog, lost in a very symmetrical, canine-hating world.
The Japanese archipelago, 20 years in the future. Canine saturation has reached epidemic proportions. An outbreak of dog flu rips through the city of Megasaki. Mayor Kobayashi issues emergency orders, calling for a hasty quarantine. Trash Island becomes an exile colony. The Isle of Dogs.
The story really begins when the mayor's adopted son, Atari, flies to the island on a small airplane. This group of dogs he meets on the island help him search for his dog.
We get the idea. You were looking for your lost dog spots. Does anybody know?
With a puppet like these dogs, there are muscles all throughout the face. There are little armature bones that are moved around, and it takes a lot of experience to know how to really bring a face to life.
I bite. A good animator could probably get 3 seconds of film a day. It's literally one picture at a time, and then you change an eyebrow. You change a little head movement. I don't know that I would be able to have the patience for that.
Get out of here and don't come back.
Playing a dog with human characteristics, you really don't approach it any differently than you would if it was a human.
Will you help him? The little pilot.
Why should I?
Because he's a 12-year-old boy.
The joy of this is that dogs bring out the best of us.
Wherever he is, if he's alive, we'll find your dog.
Dogs only want love, companionship, faithfulness, and play. And it's like, if we can just simplify our lives to what they offer, I think the world would be a much better place.
I wish somebody spoke his language.
Wow. So, I love dogs. Do you love dogs? It's just, that's the title. That's how that works. Ellen, it's a Wes Anderson film about dogs in a futuristic Japan. What did you make of it?
This film has revealed to me that there is a Venn diagram overlap between people who think cats are better than dogs and people who find Wes Anderson films not charming, but in fact unbearably twee. and I am a cat owner, so
right. So
that will tell you.
You're not a Wes Anderson fan.
Not really, although I think it should be said that in this film, a lot of the things I normally find kind of mannered about his work, like the way the actors speak their dialogue with just no expression and they sort of all move in a straight line, actually works really well in stop motion animation.
Yeah,
so I find this a much better Wes Anderson
sort of
experience.
Him doing animation is kind of the next phase of his directing style.
It makes total sense.
So he's not going to deal with actors or weather or any of those things that might interrupt his need for people to walk in perfect straight lines and mumble inexpressively. And
of course, the animation really brings to the fore his total attention to detail. The hairs on the dogs are bristling.
Yes, but I always think with animation films when they go, oh, there's 1,000 hairs on that dog and we had to move them all, I think, well, that was your idea. Your decision to make an animated film.
Don't complain to us.
Yeah, don't come to me fetching about that. Deborah, it's set in Japan, and there's been some critical pushback to the film about ideas that it's using cultural appropriation.
Yes.
What do you make of that?
I think that's right. It's like a Pinterest board. Japan. It's like if you think all the things I love about Japan, sumo, sushi. So if you see a film like Spirited Away, it's not obsessed with Japan. It's obsessed with the story. It's set in Japan because it's a Japanese director. And this film is like things Wes Anderson likes about Japan, and then you think, oh, it's going to be about 5 Japanese dogs. It's not. It's about 5 frat bros, and that's what Wes Anderson always makes movies about.
No, but they're samurai. The dogs are samurai. It's a samurai movie. They're dishonoured samurai who've been cast out of civilization and they have to go on a quest to regain access to samurai.
Really and seriously, firstly, have you met? And secondly, were they in any way like the Wes Anderson characters that are always the Wes Anderson characters?
None, but I hope they would be.
They're not like that. They've even got English names, which is really odd, because when the little Japanese boy comes, Atari comes, he says Spotsu, and a Japanese dog wouldn't be called that. So it's really these American dogs
but
on a Japanese
don't you think
island.
that cultural appropriation thing is a bit of a distractor, though? Because he's allowed to like Japanese things, and he obviously does a lot, and that's fine. It's more that I think it's slightly culturally insensitive in places, like the sort of mushroom cloud is maybe a bit in bad taste.
It's in the tradition,
kind of
because it's an allegory. And in fact, actually, I found the first 10 minutes... like klaxon, like satire, allegory alert. This is about an important topic, which I found actually quite jarring, because I thought, I can work that out for myself. I'm fine with that, don't worry. Often when you do satire allegory, you set it in another society, so you can use that to reflect on your own. It's about America, it's about race and things like that in the States, and so it's using Japan to have arm's length.
I think that gets
for
confused, though, because of the kind of the slight insensitivity.
Yes, exactly.
Really
But I think that's what he's trying to. That's what he's trying to do, isn't he?
But then don't have the white saviour character, who's the little girl who comes along and saves the day by being gaijin, by being from another country, and motivating all the Japanese people who don't do anything about this dictatorship.
Yeah. So I think we're concluded there that Wes Anderson needs to go back to his bed. Right, now...
Bad boy, Wes Anderson.
Bad boy. You know what it's like? You wait for one Steven Spielberg film and then 2 come along within 3 months of each other. Hot on the heels of his Watergate drama The Post comes sci-fi epic Ready Player One. And it couldn't be more different, thank goodness. Set in 2045, when the Earth is a mess and everyone takes refuge by popping on a headset and gaming their lives away. Let's take a look.
Hidden key, a leap not taken. Retrace your steps, escape your past, and the key will be yours at last. What part of your past are you trying to escape, Halliday?
Wade Watts is our hero, and he's kind of a nerdy guy who lives in a trailer, and in the future the trailers are stacked one on top of the other. They're called the stacks. And he's kind of alone in this world. And he uses the oasis, this amazing world, to escape from what he suffers in the real world.
This is the oasis, a whole virtual universe. You can do anything, be anyone, without going anywhere at all.
I was completely wowed by the book, and it was a crazy, conceptually, nutty idea, but an idea that was not too far away from a future reality. And having made Minority Report and having spent so much time trying to imagine what the future could be for all of us in that circumstance, I suddenly saw a future that It wasn't that far away from what I think is going to happen someday.
And now, people have lost their lives. No.
This is war.
We ask you to join us on Planet Doom. In the name of James Halliday himself, help us save the Oasis. Save the Oasis.
Save the world.
Players, are you ready?
So his last film, The Post, was serious, furrowed brow Spielberg. This is popcorn Spielberg on steroids Spielberg, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Ellen, did you enjoy Ready Player One?
Loved it. Really enjoyed it.
I loved it too, and I didn't expect to. I thought, oh, it's a lad's film, it's about blowing stuff up and punching people in the face. Absolutely couldn't have loved it more. I thought it was spectacular. But there was a real story, and I was absolutely gripped, and I cared about the characters. I thought the representation was really, really good. You know, in an indie film like, you know, Isle of Dogs, 5 male dogs, 1 girl dog with a pink bow, and going, ooh, I'm so pretty. But in this one, there's amazing representation. I really, really cared about Artemis, who's the female lead, and she was so kick-ass, and she drove a lot of the plot. There was a wonderful Lena Waithe. There was lots of racial
she's
diversity.
really, I mean, she's arguably the main plot driver in the. He's sort of watching her a lot of the time, Wade or Parzival, depending on which identity it's. Because this is a film about avatars. This is a film about people escaping life and living their fantasies through virtual reality, and it looks breathtaking.
Yeah, but it's not just, crucially, it's not just a kind of Easter egg hunt where you have to go through ticking off all the references you get. And in fact, there's quite a few, because I'm not really a gamer, there's definitely stuff in there that I didn't get, but all that made me want to do is watch it a second time and get more out of it. And because all of the references, even the ones you don't get, are just so spectacular, visually spectacular, especially if you see it in IMAX, which I recommend people do, that doesn't matter.
But there's one central reference in the middle of the film that, for me, almost overpowered the movie completely, because it was so satisfying as an idea, which is a nod to a legendary filmmaker. And if you're a cineast, I'll say no more. If you're a cineast, you'll be in absolute hog heaven. It's a brilliant moment.
Yeah.
And in fact, I mean, I read the book a couple of months ago in anticipation of the film, and in the book, the idea that Spielberg has taken from the book and upgunned into this central scene isn't really brilliant, and he's turned it into this absolutely breathtaking piece of cinema.
And I love that even the casting is like another sort of restrained reference to the 80s or the 90s.
Yeah.
Like Ty Sheridan's got this kind of wonderfully gawky look about him. He reminds me a bit of Corey Feldman.
Yeah.
And the female lead, Olivia Cooke, is kind of like Winona Ryder meets a bit of Molly Ringwald. And then you've got Lena Waithe, who's like perfectly forward casting. It's brilliant.
And King Kong.
Yeah.
And a T-Rex.
Yes.
And all these, I mean, it is a sort of shopping list of references.
It's the first time I've watched a film and thought they need an Academy Award for Best Rights Acquisition.
Because rights are really hard.
Well.
Different people's rights are really difficult to get hold of. Exactly. Lawyers all talking to each other and arguing.
There must have been a lot
only
of meetings.
Spielberg could have pulled it off, because he must be able to. He just rings people and goes, "Hey, buddy, can I have a? You know, can I use the DeLorean?"
And the Star Trek and everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a breathtaking film. Hated by critics, loved by audiences, and brilliantly trashy. We all know what to expect from a horror film, right? Wrong. Led by films like Get Out, It Follows, a brilliant movie, and the forthcoming Ghost Stories, a new generation of horror films are challenging expectations and winning plaudits galore. So, are we in the midst of a golden age for the genre, or are critics just catching up with what horror fans have always known? Brace yourself, things are about to get scary within our compliance limits. Horror fans rejoice. The next few months see the release of several anticipated scary movies, including Ghost Stories, which, unusually for a supernatural chiller, has already taken the critical world by storm.
You don't know everything.
It's been amazing for us because we literally phone each other and go, oh my God, have you read these reviews? We're 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. The reviews have been from broadsheet, tabloid, Twitter, just amazing. Part of that might be that tastes are changing towards horror.
I think there's always been a snobbery about horror movies, and I think that's just because they're seen as these kind of slightly trashy, low-rent horror movie, you know, it's sort of like something that's too easy to please the audience. Like, hey, you don't need much, do you? You just need like a bogeyman to leap out and go, ah!
I think, you know, horror is never popular with critics, never respectable for the obvious reasons. It's transgressive, and you know, it's dealing with stuff that people don't talk about in polite society.
We like to think of ourselves as serious people, and that means we're sort of embarrassed by direct emotional genres. Comedy and horror are the ones that suffer most.
Weirdly now, it's probably the first time in a mainstream way that it can be well regarded. And, you know, we've had, obviously, Get Out. Oscar-nominated, multi-Oscar nominated. In previous years, wouldn't have had a look in.
You're not actually sure, was it a horror movie? It was marketed as a horror movie. Lots of people say, well, that wasn't really a horror, was it? It was more like a social satire.
Last year, the debate over what does or doesn't constitute a horror film reached new heights, following a Guardian article which coined the controversial term post-horror.
When I was writing about post-horror, I was looking for a way to describe a certain type of horror movie that I'd seen around, where audiences were going to see these films and coming out disappointed because it wasn't satisfying their expectations of what a horror movie should be.
The idea of post-horror is that instead of having all the kind of what they call jump scares, which is when you'd perhaps open a door or a hand would leap out of you or something like that, which literally makes the audience go, instead of that you have a kind of creeping existential dread.
There were films like A Ghost Story and It Comes at Night in particular. It was a film that had elements of horror stories, Cabin in the Woods, dark fear, but it didn't put them together in a way that people expected. Spoiler alert, there wasn't particularly anything that came at night.
Hit horror films that have had good reviews, like The Witch a couple of years ago, It Follows, The Babadook, all films I really like. They tend to be horror built from atmosphere and extreme psychological states, and sometimes knowledge of history, sometimes of acute observation of current social phenomena, but they're still horror.
The horror community didn't like it when I came up with the term post-horror.
I cannot hear this. This is not so.
I don't believe in post-horror. I really struggle with this.
There's such implicit snobbery. You wouldn't say that thing with songs. It's not a musical.
Yes, my film is called Werewolf Cheerleaders, but it's really about relationships. Yeah, you think, yeah, right.
I don't think the films themselves have changed. I think it's just the way that we talk about horror has changed.
There are some that get regarded as filth when they come out. Be that Peeping Tom, be that Night of the Living Dead. These things that should be flushed down a toilet, as the reviews will say, that are extraordinary works of art that have something profound to say.
I think every single horror film is trying to pick up on some cultural anxiety that's going on in the moment.
All right, Vince, hit him in the head, right between the eyes.
If you look at a whole bunch of horror films from the 1950s, you can see, it's the Cold War, people were worried about nuclear war or McCarthyism.
They come from another world, unleashed to take over the bodies and souls of the people of our planet.
That's another reason why at the moment, maybe, it feels that horror is suddenly grabbing the mainstream. We live in horrific times.
I do think that there are probably big things going on, particularly in Britain and America at the moment, that instill a sense of paranoia, powerlessness, crushing despair, all that stuff that leads people to go out and write scary stuff. We're living in a dark age, which is good for horror.
Cool. Don't have nightmares, everybody. You're not watching Crime Watch, don't panic. Right, we asked you to tweet in your top horror films. I have some tweets here. Hugh says Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so grimy you need to shower after watching it. Ben is a fan of American Werewolf in London. I'd go with that, with the amazing makeup that they had to invent an Oscar for, he says. Tom suggested Rosemary's Baby. Do we like Rosemary's Baby?
Yeah, good choice.
It's a proper chiller.
Yeah.
A unique, fascinating story. Mia Farrow and Ruth Gordon are both outstanding. My favourite horror film, The Shining. Right, so last up is Journeyman, the latest British film from British actor turned director Paddy Considine. He plays Matty Burton, a champion boxer whose life and marriage is turned upside down after he suffers a serious head injury.
When I come back through that door, I'm still going to be champion of the world.
Journeyman is a story about a world championship boxer who suffers a brain injury after a world title fight.
Matty?
And the film is really about the struggle afterwards and his recovery and the impact of the accident and how it affects his family and close friends.
Who is it?
That is your little girl. It's Mia.
Mia.
Do you understand?
No.
I wouldn't classically call it a boxing movie because it doesn't really have those sort of archetypes within it. You know, I realised that when I was going to make a boxing film that I didn't really want to make something that had been made before.
That's Jackie.
Right.
He's in your corner.
Oh. Who's that?
That's Richie. He's your trainer.
Right.
One of the most difficult scenes I had to shoot was in a rehabilitation centre where Matty's sitting amongst actual people who did suffer brain injury. They set the cameras up and I walked in and I sat on an exercise bike, and within the scene I even pulled my hood up because I just felt quite odd doing that in front of people who were actually dealing with this. You can't not look at a film because it's too difficult to look at. There's enough escapism out there.
We got married here. Do you remember? Do you remember?
Yeah.
You don't, do you?
People are living under these circumstances. And while the escapism is fantastic, it's great fun, there's got to be a place in the world still for films like Journeyman.
Who are you fighting?
Future.
Between you and me.
He's not wrong, it is a tough watch.
It's a really tough
It's a hard film. Deborah, are you a fan of the boxing movie?
It's not my main genre, Al. I'm not going to lie to you, but it was an exquisite performance and it is a remarkable achievement for him to write and direct and give this performance, which is almost documentary style. It's so believable. But actually, that was my problem with it, that I felt like the story was really underwritten. And especially when wonderful Jodie Whittaker leaves the house, because she has to, we won't spoil it and say why, but she just leaves the screen. And for me, she was the interesting character because it was her moral dilemma. What do you do when your husband gets a brain injury? You still love him, but it's not him anymore. And do you stay with him even when he gets violent, even when he's just clearly not the same person?
Ellen, you're nodding a great deal there.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same about this film?
I would agree with that, yeah. He's brilliant in it, and you get the sense as well that it's the kind of partly autobiographical movie. I think he said that, in fact, in that he was basing the character's experience of coming back to himself on his own diagnosis with Asperger's syndrome. Yeah. But there is also this feeling that part of what's great about the direction is how it builds up the tension, and it kind of relies on this primal fear that women have of men being violent for that tension, and then totally turns its back on the main female character, and that does feel like a bit of a betrayal. So I mean,
it felt to me very much, and this is, in a way, I mean, obviously this is a criticism, but not a damning one. It feels like a two-part TV film, and almost there's the end of the first episode is when she leaves, and then we resume, and the story sort of resumes and resets, and as you said, changes into a sort of documentary style.
Yeah, well, it's just a man recovering, like a case study. I mean, if only we didn't have the rule that there could only be one woman in any film. If only there was a possibility. She could have had a female friend and they could have had a conversation, and that would have been fascinating. Like, I still love him, but it's not him. And how do we come back together? I have a rule. You know the Bechdel test?
Yes.
My test, I call it the Dubs test because I invented it, and I'm DF Dubs. to some people, and I can be to you, Al. My test is, if you listen to the woman, will she kill the story?
Yeah.
Because in so many films, the woman's going, don't have any plot, please don't leave the house, husband, because otherwise bad things will happen. And it didn't fall into that. She didn't tell him not to go, but she clearly didn't want him to go. And then it's all about him. There's no life for her outside him.
Yes,
and we don't know how she's feeling.
Yeah, and the film's about one of the things the film's about is the impact your decisions that go wrong can have on those around you. And so when the people around him absent themselves, there's basically less drama to be delivered. Is a problem. But he is stunning in it. He is.
And it is still a boxing film, I think, even if only by omission, because the best boxing films are about other stuff as well.
Yeah. Raging Bull is about masculinity,
exactly.
about wanting to be the best.
And also, there's something weird about the way it's so reverential about the world of boxing that it doesn't properly confront what that world's responsibility is towards its injured boxers and people who have a bad time out.
I felt the ending, without giving it away, felt to me like a bit of a had a taste of a bit of a cop-out.
Yeah.
It was troubling to me that ultimately boxing was glorified and it wasn't boxing's fault and it wasn't his fault, it wasn't anybody's fault. It's just one of those things that happens if you continually punch someone in the head.
Yeah. So, we've got to talk about what our film of the week is, and I have a feeling it wasn't Journeyman. So, Ellen, your film of the week?
Ready Player One!
Ready Player One!
Ready Player One, that's right, the trifecta for Ready Player One. It wasn't going to be anything else, really.
I mean, it was so good. And I didn't think I
Irresistible.
was going to like it.
Irresistible Spielberg, basically. Spielberg and his sort of multiplex pomp. I mean, the thing is, I wanted Journeyman to have a bit more to it, is the frustration. Because what I liked about it is it wasn't set in space or virtual reality. It was someone's house where they made cups of tea for each other.
Yeah.
You don't see that every day in the cinema.
There was some charm to it at times, but it just didn't have enough story, ultimately. And we needed more Jodie. We always need more Jodie.
We always need more Jodie. Well, that's almost it for this week and for the series. That's right. Yes, it's time for this really very plush sofa to go back into storage once again next to the Ark of the Covenant. We're playing out with a cult classic that hits its 40th birthday this year and returns to the cinemas with a 4K restoration next month. And it's with a heavy heart that I tell you that film is Grease. I cannot stand this film. It helped make the careers of John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John. It's empirically the worst film of the 1970s.
It's the one that we want.
No, it's a terrible,
You're wrong.
dire, awful
Tell
movie.
me more, tell me more.
Car mechanics with a glitzy camp anthem and Stockard Channing being a high school girl at the age of 33.
You just want to be in it, Al.
I cannot bear this film. Why do this? Well, thanks for watching. Run the awful VT.
Yay.
Good night.
Good night.
Well, here we are again.
So this is Rondell.
Hey, so what'd you do all summer, Danny, huh?
What did you do this summer, Sandy? Oh, I spent most of it at the beach.
Oh, I just love the first day of school, don't you?
Oh, come on, you don't want to hear all the horny details.
Are you kidding me?
Are you? Sandy!
Teddy?
Go together like rama, ding-a-ding-a-dong. Remember forever as shoo-wah, wada, yippity-boom-boom. Chang, changity, changity-bop. That's the way it should be. Wow, yeah, bum-a-loo-ma, wah-bam-boom.
Tell me about it.
Well, that's cool, baby.